These were two different groups of ships that were commissioned by the Spanish government, and they had been in the New World. And if you go back to that period of time, they actually had been held up in the New World for quite some time because there was a war leading up to this point in time when they left called the War of Spanish Succession. And as such, it was not safe for these galleons to cross the Atlantic for fear that this treasure would be raided by pirates or by enemy warring countries. And so, all that said, they held up in the New World in places like Mexico, in Colombia, different places like this for several years. And as you would imagine, the King of Spain was eager to get his treasure, and they relied on this treasure from the New World for the basically to keep Spain the world power, the world dominating power that it was at the time. And so, come 1715, it was even delayed, and by the time they were able to all meet up in Cuba, is where they met up and load the remainder of any treasure. It was almost the end of July, and even then, they knew that that was dangerous time for potential hurricanes. They didn't have weather reporting like we do now, but when they left, they had to leave because they were under tremendous pressure to get this wealth to Spain to pay probably all the debt that they'd incurred in the war. They went through what we call the Gulf Stream, and that's between the Bahamas and the Florida coast there. It's the Straits of Florida, and that Gulf Stream acts like a river. So if you can imagine these huge sailing vessels, it would be nice for at least part of your journey to be on a river so you wouldn't have to be dependent upon the wind. Well, usually it works out brilliantly, and then after a while, they make the crossing to Spain. But in this case, when they were in those Straits of Florida and not terribly far from the coastline of Florida, the hurricane struck and it forced those boats up against the shallow waters and there are reefs. And as you can imagine, it did tremendous amounts of damage to this fleet. All but one of the ships was lost. One got away, a smaller vessel that was actually a French vessel that was just riding along for the ride. But all of the ships were lost. Some were just completely obliterated. Others kind of wrecked in a way that they could be salvaged. And so that's why this area that where we found this has become known as the Treasure Coast, and that's why the stuff's there. Actually the Crown did quite a bit of salvaging right after the wrecks, after the couple of years that followed, and they stayed around until they had satisfied the king as far as what they had recovered. But what they left behind was a lot because it's, as you imagine, they didn't have scuba gear back then, and it's incredibly difficult for us even with scuba gear because of the conditions. So
We
that's the
saw
story, and
we
yeah,
saw
go
some of
ahead.
the footage there, Sal, of your colleague diving to retrieve the coins. It did look pretty murky. What about the coins themselves, and what sort of state are they in?
Right, and so this, with all the time that has passed, a lot of times when we find artifacts and silver coins, they have a lot of damage just from the that much time in the ocean and the salt conditions and getting sand washed over them over and over and over every storm, every tide change. But in this case, these coins are in amazing state of preservation. Some of the ways we gauge that even before we do conservation on them is by their weight. And a lot of these coins are almost the appropriate weight for coins of those denominations. And these coins are mostly 8 reales, which is the largest denomination silver coin of the era. There are also some 4 reales, and they're all silver. And the last time I think we did the research that this number of large silver coins were found on these wrecks was in 1990. So it's not something that happens every day. And then to combine that with the fact that the condition of them is really good, it's a real windfall for us from an educational standpoint, also just from the find itself, that not only is it a lot of coins, but there are a lot of coins in really good condition, can tell us a lot.
So what happens to the coins now then, Sal? Because you have exclusive salvage rights, don't you? Do they belong to you? What happens to them?
Well, we have the exclusive salvage rights, and we are the sole custodian of these wreck sites as well as the artifacts that come up. Now, the word is custodian, not owner at this point, because each season, the real work starts after the find is made. And it begins with us checking in everything, and we have really strict inventory control on this because we are responsible at this point to the U.S. District Court and to the state of Florida to correctly inventory this collection, which includes weighing it, photographing it, as well as conserving it. The conservation is a slow and careful process that involves electrolysis, but it turns the coins like those pictures you see from green to back to a silver coin like you would expect. And the green is because they're not pure silver. They have a little bit of copper in them, and there's some silver oxides that come out from that much time in the ocean. But even some of that, you can still see details through them. Now, once we've conserved them and done all the documentation, we submit that data to the state of Florida. The state of Florida then has an opportunity to make a request for their donation. They can take up to 20% based on what their museum needs are. And then if we agree with that, then we go in front of the judge at the district court, and the judge then does an adjudication. And the adjudication then gives us title to the coins, and we meet with Florida and give their part to them so they can display in museums. And the remainder is then divided with the subcontractor, in this instance, Captain Levin and his crew, and the owners of our company that I work for.
Well, congratulations on the fine and for your work, Sal. Good to so. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat.
Yeah, thank y'all.